Hi everyone, my name's Carly and welcome to Healing the Anxious Mind, an anxiety support community here on YouTube. I am so grateful for you all to join me today and to chat a little bit more about what anxiety really looks like. Before we dive in, I wanted to introduce myself because this is the first video that I've ever posted on YouTube. And so my name is Carly and I am a third-year medical student, and I'm also someone who struggled with anxiety for many years. My goal with this community is to allow us all to facilitate a conversation of talking freely about anxiety. What is it? How to heal? And helpful practices that I've found beneficial in my own healing journey that I want to share with all of you. So without further ado, let's get started. So today I wanted to focus on what anxiety is really. And by that, I mean, we talk about anxiety and everyone's experience with anxiety is so unique and so different. But I wanted to talk about the underlying physiology or what's going on in our bodies. As someone who experienced anxiety and panic attacks, it's extremely difficult to know what's going on. Everything feels so scary and you don't know exactly what's happening. And what's really valuable in those moments is to learn some of the physiology. Now, you don't have to pull out your molecular biology textbook or anything like that. I'm hoping to simplify it in a way that's understandable for anyone to sort of appreciate what's going on in our bodies physically and how that can help us in our healing of anxiety and in our awareness of what's actually going on. So I want you to take a moment and imagine for me that you're on a picnic and it's a beautiful day and you're on a picnic in this beautiful park, whatever park you want, and you are sitting, you're having a good lunch, and all of a sudden a giant cougar walks out. If you haven't seen a cougar before, Google a cougar. I'll put a picture, cougar. And the cougar walks out and immediately your heart's probably gonna start beating. Your breathing's gonna get more shallow. Your body's gonna start responding and saying, hey, we need sugar. We need something to help us here because there's a giant cougar, and your fight or flight mechanisms may be activated, which means that we're getting ready to either run, and this is our innate response. We're getting ready to run, freak out, stay still and freeze, whatever we're planning to do. Our body's preparing for that. And in those moments where our body prepares for that, we experience all these symptoms. Our heart starts to beat faster because we need to pump more blood to the rest of our bodies. Our breathing will become more shallow so we can get more oxygen in, blow off more waste products like CO2, and get ourselves moving. Our muscles are going to start to get ready by our body will mobilize sugar so our muscles can get the energy they need if we need to run or we need to get away. And all of these things are completely normal when we see a cougar. But imagine now that you're lying in bed at night and you're about to go to sleep. You've had a very stressful long day and you start to experience these same symptoms. They feel out of the blue, they feel uncalled for, and you have no idea what to do. That is when we start to experience anxiety. That same response that we had to the cougar is the exact same response we're having in bed, but there's no visible threat. There's no visible anything. There's no cougar in those moments. And that's when anxiety can start to take hold and change how we react to these bodily sensations that normally would be fine if we were out in public with a cougar or we were doing exercise and our heart started to beat fast. But now we're bringing in this dysregulation into it because now we're hyper aware of these things being something that might harm us because anxiety feels extremely uncomfortable. So once we start to recognize that anxiety is the same response, we can then begin to make the connections. When we see the cougar or not, something called adrenaline is released. And adrenaline is one of the things, everyone says, oh, you get an adrenaline rush. Well, an adrenaline rush is essentially a surge of energy is how I want you to view it. And this surge of energy usually comes in stressful scenarios or scenarios where we need to protect ourselves or where we're really excited about something is where this adrenaline comes in. But when our nervous system begins to become dysregulated, then we can start to have these surges of adrenaline when we don't think we need them, when our bodies are simply getting ready for bed at night, or when we're trying to relax. And this is how anxiety develops, because anxiety is this release of adrenaline at otherwise times that it really shouldn't be released. And this can come from many different factors. And one of the main ones is nervous system dysregulation. I mentioned this fight or flight response that we have, and it's often on a teeter-totter to the opposite response our body has, which is the rest and digest. And this makes up the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. And they're always in balance. But when we're experiencing chronic stressors, we're not getting very much sleep, maybe we're having a lot of caffeine, maybe we've experienced some trauma in our lives that we haven't necessarily worked through or identified, or we have, but we're still working through it, or we're experiencing different stress responses, maybe loss. There are so many factors that are at play that can cause us to build this sort of dysregulation where our fight and flight response is always on, even though our rest and digest response helps us calm, that calm state we're in. We're always in this state of hyper awareness. When we start to see anxiety as this state of hyper awareness and this adrenaline, we start to see what we need to do. If you're the person on the top of the teeter-totter over here and you want to come down, we need to find a way to balance. And that's exactly what we need to do in healing anxiety. Understanding the physiology of the adrenaline surge that's going on and the fact that this is our body's way of protecting us. And I totally agree. You're probably watching this and you're like, Carly, it does not feel like my body's trying to protect me. It's incredibly uncomfortable when this anxiety happens. I agree. It is incredibly uncomfortable because our body's preparing for something that isn't happening. We have all this adrenaline on board and we're not sure what to do with it. But in reality, this adrenaline will dissipate, and it might not feel like it in that moment, but adrenaline can only peak for 15 to 20 minutes. Our adrenal glands, which is what makes the adrenaline, essentially they can only put out so much of this adrenaline before they go, oh, I'm out. I don't have any more. I'm tired. And that's where we can get that fatigue. I don't know if you've ever experienced a panic attack, but sometimes an hour later, or 45 minutes later or so, we're quite tired. Maybe we still feel a bit of anxiety, but we might also feel very energy deplete. And that's because our body can't produce any more adrenaline, or very little. So when we begin to recognize that adrenaline is what's driving this state, but the adrenaline truly can only peak after a few minutes, then we can begin to recognize how can we get our bodies back into that rest and digest state. And there's so much that comes with anxiety for many people. And in future videos, I want to address what those symptoms may look like. But today I wanted to give this general overview of this is what adrenaline is. This is why it's there. It's trying to protect us. But in the moments where we don't expect it, that's when we start to experience anxiety, where these adrenaline surges happen, but we're not necessarily recognizing why they're happening. We always search for a cause. Why is this happening? And the answer sometimes is that we don't know why it's happening. But we know we are under a lot of chronic stress. This has happened, that's happened. There's lots of things underlying it. But when we start to look at that teeter-totter, we have to start thinking about how we can get ourselves into a rest and digest state. So when we simplify anxiety down, it's an inappropriate adrenaline release that can be caused due to many factors, including nervous system dysregulation. And that's a big term, and I'm definitely going to be talking about that more because it's something that we hear a lot about, but we may not know a lot about. But when we recognize that this adrenaline piece is what our body is doing to protect us, it may change the way we view anxiety. Instead of anxiety being this big, scary beast making us feel incredibly uncomfortable, it may still be incredibly uncomfortable, but we're understanding that the physiology is adrenaline. It's an adrenaline surge. And sometimes that can bring down the negative or intrusive thoughts we're having about, oh my goodness, is this? Is it that? Is it this? In reality, it's adrenaline. And I do want to take a note that if this is your first time experiencing anxiety, or this is something new to you, or there's a change in what you're experiencing, it is always valuable to check in with a healthcare provider. Check in with your doctor, make sure that you've had a workup to make sure nothing else may be going on. But if we do come to the conclusion that anxiety is something that you're experiencing, then we can also start to recognize, okay, this is the adrenaline surge. We may not be able to control when the adrenaline surge is happening, but we can help support our bodies and minds through that surge and finding that balance again. because anxiety healing is possible. If you'd like to learn more about anxiety, learn more about some of the things I chatted about today, subscribe, watch for my videos, and if you'd like to join our online community on Instagram of over 100,000 people, you can join below as well. Whatever resonates with you, and I wish you all the best. So I'll see you next time. We'll chat a little bit more about different symptoms of anxiety and all the things we talked about today, and we'll continue going from there. All right? Take care.